My name is Samantha Mitchell, 26 years old. And I've always thought I understood my family. That changed last Thanksgiving when my billionaire grandfather, Richard Blackwell, stood before our entire family sporting a dark purple bruise beneath his right eye. The room fell silent as he tapped his crystal glass, his usually commanding presence now tinged with something I'd never seen before: vulnerability. "Before we eat," he announced, his voice wavering, "I need to tell you all the truth about our family's fortune. What happened next destroyed everything I thought I knew." Before I dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? If you're enjoying these real-life family drama stories, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for new uploads every week. The truth about wealth and power in my family was nothing like I imagined, and trust me, you'll want to hear how this all unfolded. To understand the magnitude of what happened that Thanksgiving, you need to know about the Blackwell dynasty. My grandfather, Richard Blackwell, built what everyone believed was a self-made tech empire from nothing but determination and brilliance. At least, that's what we all thought. Growing up, I enjoyed all the privileges that came with being a Blackwell. I attended an Ivy League university, lived in a luxury apartment, and never worried about money. My mother, Charlotte, Richard's only daughter, married my father, James Mitchell, a corporate attorney who was always eager to please his billionaire father-in-law. They gave me a life of privilege alongside my siblings, my older brother Thomas, who at 30 was already CFO at Grandpa's company, and my younger sister Haley, 23, who leveraged our family name to become a fashion influencer with millions of followers. Then there were my cousins, Patrick and Kimberly, children of Richard's son William and his wife Diana. William served as the company's COO and had always been intensely competitive, especially with my mother. Family gatherings often featured subtle power plays between the two siblings as they vied for Richard's approval. Our annual Thanksgiving celebration at Richard's Aspen estate was legendary. A lavish multi-day affair with personal chefs, premium wines, and perfectly choreographed family activities. It wasn't just dinner. It was a celebration of Blackwell's success and wealth. Photographers from social magazines were sometimes invited for carefully staged family portraits that would appear in business publications praising the Blackwell legacy. My grandfather Richard was the sun around which our family orbited. Standing 6'2" with a full head of silver hair and piercing blue eyes, he commanded any room he entered. He was demanding and precise in business and family matters alike, expecting nothing less than excellence. But he was also generous, funding our educations, startup ideas, and extravagant lifestyles without hesitation. Despite his sometimes intimidating presence, I always felt a special connection with Grandpa Richard. While Thomas inherited his business acumen and Haley his charisma, Richard often said I had his analytical mind and integrity. "You see through the noise, Samantha," he would tell me during our private conversations in his study. That's rare in this family. That's why I noticed the changes in him weeks before that fateful Thanksgiving. Our regular Sunday phone calls became shorter. He canceled our monthly lunch twice. When we did speak, he seemed distracted, asking me strange questions about my views on legacy and redemption. I dismissed it as stress from work, never imagining what was really happening. When I arrived at the estate the day before Thanksgiving, the first thing I noticed were the security upgrades. New cameras, additional personnel, and Richard's personal bodyguard, Frank, shadowing him constantly. Richard had always valued privacy, but never to this extent. That evening, I overheard a heated argument between Richard and William in the library. "You have no right!" William shouted, his voice carrying down the hallway. "You'll destroy everything we've built!" Richard's response was too quiet to hear, but when William stormed out, his face was contorted with rage. He didn't even acknowledge me as he passed. Later that night, Richard asked me to meet him privately after dinner the next day. "There's something important I need to discuss with you, Samantha," he said, his hand slightly trembling as he placed it on my shoulder. "Something I should have told you years ago." I agreed, concerned but never imagining the bombshell that would detonate in our perfect family facade less than 24 hours later. Thanksgiving Day began like any other in our family tradition. The estate was immaculate, with elegant fall decorations, roaring fireplaces, and the scent of gourmet cooking filling the air. Staff moved quietly through the rooms, pouring champagne and arranging elaborate appetizer platters. Family members arrived in waves. William and Diana with their children first, always punctual, followed by my parents and sister Haley, who made a fashionable late entrance documenting her arrival for her followers. Thomas had been at the estate for days, supposedly working on year-end reports with Grandpa, though I'd barely seen them together. Everyone performed their usual roles. William discussing business prospects, Diana commenting on the decor, my father James laughing too loudly at Richard's jokes, and Haley capturing carefully curated moments for social media. When Richard failed to appear for the pre-dinner cocktails, William sent Thomas to fetch him. The atmosphere shifted subtly as minutes ticked by. Then, the double doors to the dining room opened, and my grandfather walked in. The bruise under his right eye was impossible to miss. A dark purple crescent that stood in stark contrast to his pale skin. He'd made no attempt to conceal it. His normally perfect posture seemed slightly stooped, and the commanding presence that typically filled any room he entered was diminished somehow. I watched my mother's hand fly to her mouth, while William suddenly became intensely interested in his drink. Richard walked deliberately to the head of the table and tapped his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The room fell silent immediately. "Before we eat," he said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone, "I need to tell you all the truth about our family's fortune." He took a deep breath, surveying our faces, then continued, "The Blackwell success story you've all been told is a lie. I am not a self-made man. The technology that built our empire was stolen, taken from my former business partner, Lawrence Weber." The silence in the room became deafening. I felt as though the air had been sucked out of the space. Richard continued, his voice growing stronger. 45 years ago, Lawrence and I were working on an AI algorithm that could revolutionize data processing. Lawrence was the true genius, the visionary. I was good with business and saw the potential. When he refused to take the direction I wanted with commercialization, Richard paused, swallowing hard. I took his research, patented it under my name, and used my family connections to destroy his credibility when he tried to fight back. My mother made a small, distressed sound. William sat rigidly, his knuckles white around his glass. "Lawrence lost everything," Richard continued. "His reputation, his career, his savings fighting me in court. He died 15 years ago in poverty, while I became a billionaire from his work. This bruise?" He gestured to his eye. "A small price to pay for what I've done." William suddenly stood, his chair scraping loudly. "This is absurd. You're talking about ancient history that nobody can verify. Why bring this up now and threaten everything we've built?" Thomas quickly backed William up. "Grandpa, business is business. Whatever happened back then, the company has created thousands of jobs and valuable products. You can't just rewrite history." Richard remained calm. "I can't change the past, but I can try to make amends. I've decided to find Lawrence's descendants and transfer 40% of company shares to them, the portion that rightfully should have been his." The room erupted. William was shouting about betrayal, Thomas arguing about shareholder obligations, my father demanding to know if Richard had lost his mind. Through the chaos, I watched my grandfather, the slight relief in his expression now that the secret was out, despite the storm it had created. As arguments continued around the table, my mother pulled me aside, her fingers digging into my arm. "Your grandfather is being manipulated," she whispered urgently. "Someone has gotten to him. This isn't like him at all." Before I could respond, Richard approached us. "Samantha, could I speak with you privately?" he asked, ignoring the continuing arguments behind him. In his study, away from the family chaos, Richard looked exhausted but resolved. "I need your help," he said simply. "I've located Lawrence's granddaughter, but making contact has proven complicated. William has been monitoring my communications, trying to prevent this." "Why me?" I asked, still processing everything I'd heard. "Because you're the only one I trust to do what's right, regardless of how it affects your inheritance," he answered. "Will you help me find her and make this right?" Despite my confusion and the knowledge that helping him would put me against most of my family, I found myself nodding. "I'll help you, Grandpa." Relief washed over his face as he reached into his desk and removed a weathered leather journal. "This contains everything. The original research notes, correspondence between Lawrence and me, and information about his family. Be careful who you trust with this, Samantha. As I took the journal, I had no idea that while we were meeting, William was already calling an emergency board meeting, making the first major move in what would become a vicious family war. The morning after Thanksgiving dawned cold and clear, the mountain views from my guest room normally a source of peace. But sleep had eluded me as I'd stayed up most of the night reading Lawrence Weber's journal. The pages revealed a brilliant mind and, increasingly, the desperate writings of a man watching his life's work being stolen while legal and financial barriers made justice impossible. I started my research on Lawrence's family immediately, setting up my laptop in a quiet corner of the estate's library. Lawrence had one daughter, Elizabeth, who had distanced herself from her father after his reputation was destroyed. She'd married, had one child named Allison Weber, and died in a car accident 10 years ago. Allison would be about 27 now, close to my age. Using my academic research credentials, I located Allison's last known address and employment. She'd been working as a data analyst at a small tech firm in Seattle until 3 months ago when she abruptly quit. The timing seemed significant, coinciding with the beginning of Richard's strange behavior. As I jotted down notes, Thomas entered the library, his face tight with anger. "What are you doing?" he demanded, glancing at my computer screen. "Research," I replied vaguely. "You're helping him destroy everything our family has built," Thomas said, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you have any idea what will happen if this gets out? Stock prices will plummet. The company could face lawsuits. Our reputation will be ruined." "Maybe our reputation should be based on truth," I countered. Thomas laughed bitterly. "Truth? You sound like a naive child. The truth is that business has always worked this way. The spoils go to those who are clever enough to take them. Grandpa built an empire that's benefited all of us, including you. Your fancy degrees, your apartment, your trust fund. All paid for by the company you're now helping to dismantle." When I didn't respond, he leaned closer. "You're betraying the family, Samantha. Don't expect any of us to forget that." After Thomas left, I sat shaking, questioning whether I was doing the right thing. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Frank, Richard's head of security. "Miss Mitchell, I thought you should know that Mr. William has had several unusual visitors lately," he said quietly. "Men I don't recognize. Not from the company. They meet privately, and afterward, Mr. William always seems agitated." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Frank's weathered face remained neutral. "Your grandfather has always treated me with respect. I don't like what I'm seeing happen around here." He placed a small flash drive on the table. "Security footage from the East Wing entrance. Thought you might find it interesting." With that, he left, becoming my first unexpected ally in this increasingly complicated situation. The flash drive contained footage of William meeting with men who appeared to be private investigators. In one clip, I noticed something that made my heart race. A photograph passing between them that looked remarkably like Lawrence Weber. Diving deeper into Richard's journal, I found technical specifications for the AI algorithm that had made our company billions. It was revolutionary for its time. A self-learning system that could process and categorize vast amounts of unstructured data. Something that formed the foundation of modern machine learning. Lawrence had been decades ahead of his peers, and Richard had simply taken the work and claimed it as his own. That evening, William and Diana began working the family, pulling members aside for private conversations. Even from a distance, their strategy was clear. Paint Richard as unstable, possibly suffering early dementia, manipulated by guilt into making irrational decisions. The next morning, I discovered my car's tires had been slashed, all 4 of them. No security footage captured the incident, which seemed impossible given the estate's surveillance, unless someone with access had deliberately created a blind spot. My mother found me waiting for a replacement vehicle. Charlotte Blackwell Mitchell had always been elegant and controlled, but now she seemed torn, deep lines of stress around her eyes. "Sam, I don't know what your grandfather has told you, but you need to be careful," she said. "James thinks we should present a united family front with William. Do you believe what Grandpa said about Lawrence Weber? I asked directly. She looked away. Business in those days was complicated. Your grandfather did what he had to do to build something lasting. That's not an answer, Mom. It's the only one I have right now, she replied, squeezing my hand before walking away. Later that day, I called Allison Weber's former workplace, posing as a potential employer checking references. I learned she had left suddenly, providing no forwarding contact information. The HR person remembered her as brilliant but intensely private. To my surprise, my sister Haley sought me out that evening, finding me on the terrace despite the cold. I want to help, she said without preamble. I studied her suspiciously. Why would you want to get involved in this mess? Haley sighed, her perfectly made-up face serious for once. I've always known something was off about our money. The way Grandpa gets this look sometimes when people call him a self-made genius. The way certain topics are forbidden at family gatherings. She pulled her coat tighter. Also, I'm sick of being treated like an airhead who only cares about Instagram followers. Together, Haley and I discovered something disturbing in old newspaper archives. Lawrence Weber hadn't died from illness as Richard had stated. Reports indicated suicide, though details were sparse. The timing coincided with his final failed appeal against Blackwell Technologies. That night, William cornered me in the hallway outside my room, his imposing frame blocking my path. I'm only going to say this once, Samantha. Drop this crusade or I'll make sure your trust fund is frozen and your inheritance revoked. You think you're being noble, but you're just being stupid. That money is already spent, sweetheart. Your lifestyle, your future, all of it depends on this family remaining exactly as it is. As he walked away, I realized something important. The bruise under Richard's eye. When I asked my grandfather about it the next day, his answer confirmed my suspicion. William didn't appreciate my decision. Richard said simply, his reaction was physical. First time he's ever dared. But I suppose I deserved it. Looking at my grandfather, a man who had once seemed invincible now appearing frail and vulnerable, I felt my resolve strengthen. Whatever the cost, the truth needed to come out. 1 week after Thanksgiving, William called an emergency family meeting at the main Blackwell estate. The tension was palpable as everyone gathered in the formal conference room, normally reserved for business associates. Richard sat at one end of the long mahogany table, William at the other, a physical representation of the division now splitting our family. William wasted no time with pleasantries. I've called this meeting because we have a serious situation that requires immediate family intervention, he announced, nodding to his personal assistant, who distributed document folders to everyone present. These are legal papers that outline the case for temporary conservatorship over Richard's personal and business affairs. A collective gasp went through the room. William continued, his voice clinically detached. My father is exhibiting signs of diminished capacity and making decisions that could irreparably harm the company and family. The psychiatric evaluation included in your packets supports this assessment. I flipped through the documents, stunned to see a psychiatric report from a doctor Richard had never met, based on observed behaviors rather than an actual examination. My father James spoke next, betraying both Richard and my mother in one calculated move. I've reviewed these documents as both family counsel and Richard's son-in-law. The legal basis is sound. Richard's recent behavior represents a marked departure from his lifelong decision-making patterns and threatens the stability of the company. My mother's face drained of color at her husband's betrayal. She reached for Richard's hand across the table, but he sat motionless, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. I stood, adrenaline overriding my natural aversion to confrontation. This is ridiculous. Grandpa isn't mentally incompetent. He's trying to right a wrong that's haunted him for decades. There's evidence to support everything he's claimed. I pulled Lawrence's journal from my bag, placing it on the table. This journal contains original notes, correspondence, and patents that prove Lawrence Weber created the technology our company was built on. William scoffed. A convenient journal appears just when Richard starts talking about giving away 40% of a multi-billion-dollar company? Please. To my surprise, my cousin Patrick stood next. At 32, he'd always been the quietest family member, working in the company's R&D department and generally avoiding family drama. "I believe Richard," he said firmly. "He showed me the original technical specifications months ago and asked my professional opinion. The work was decades ahead of its time, and the coding style doesn't match my grandfather's other projects from that era. It's clearly the work of a different mind." William's daughter Kimberly immediately countered, "Or maybe Samantha has other motivations. With Thomas positioned to take over the company eventually, perhaps this is her way of securing power for herself?" The accusation hung in the air. Thomas, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. "I've already consulted with the company's legal team. They believe any attempt to distribute shares based on unsubstantiated claims from 45 years ago would constitute a breach of fiduciary duty to current shareholders. The board won't allow it." It was in that moment I realized Thomas had already been working against Richard behind the scenes, positioning himself regardless of the outcome. Charlotte finally found her voice, standing to address her brother. "William, Dad has built this company through decades of brilliant leadership. He's earned the right to determine its future. If he believes this is the right course of action, we should trust him." The family vote that followed was painful in its clarity. 6 against Richard's plan. William, Diana, Thomas, Kimberly, James, and Patrick's wife, Ashley. And only 3 in support: Richard, myself, and Patrick. My mother abstained, caught between loyalty to her father and pressure from her husband. Haley was conspicuously absent, having been sent on a brand ambassador trip that morning. William's doing, I suspected. The meeting adjourned with William announcing he would file the conservatorship papers the following day. As family members filtered out, I noticed Richard looking suddenly older, the weight of this betrayal evident in his posture. Over the next few days, Richard's health noticeably declined. The stress of fighting his own family took its toll, and he began canceling meetings and remaining in his private quarters. Meanwhile, I discovered that Thomas had been meeting with board members individually, sharing a narrative about Richard's unfortunate condition and positioning himself as the stable alternative to William's aggressive approach. The company was effectively splitting into factions. While examining company financial reports, I noticed irregularities in several projects under Thomas's direct control, unusual consulting fees to shell companies, and overpayment for services that seemed vaguely defined. I couldn't prove anything concrete, but my suspicions grew that Thomas had been siphoning company funds. Just as I was about to give up, Jennifer Ross, the company's associate legal counsel, approached me privately. "I can't be seen talking to you," she said, sliding a USB drive across the table in the empty company cafeteria. "But there are documents you should see. I've worked for your grandfather for 20 years. He deserves better than this." With Jennifer as my second unexpected ally, I gained access to internal communications showing William had begun positioning the company for sale to a competitor months before Richard's confession, a move that would have enriched him personally but potentially destroyed the company's independence. The pressure became nearly unbearable. My apartment lease was mysteriously terminated. Credit cards connected to family accounts stopped working. Old friends in the business world suddenly couldn't take my calls. I was being systematically isolated. One night, sitting alone in a budget hotel room, using cash to avoid being traced, I considered giving up. Fighting billionaires with unlimited resources seemed impossible, even with truth on my side. Then my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Samantha Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked. "My name is Allison Weber. I believe you've been looking for me." We arranged to meet at a public library in a neighboring town, neutral ground where we wouldn't likely be recognized. I arrived early, scanning the room for anyone who might be watching me, paranoia having become my constant companion. A slender woman with dark hair pulled into a neat bun approached my table. She wore simple, professional clothing and carried herself with quiet confidence. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place it. "Samantha Mitchell?" she asked, extending her hand. When I nodded, she sat down across from me. "I'm Rachel Dawson." Confusion must have shown on my face because she smiled apologetically. "Or, at least, that's who your grandfather knows me as. My real name is Allison Weber." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You work for my grandfather?" I managed to ask, memories suddenly clicking into place. I had seen her several times at company events. Richard's efficient, unassuming personal assistant, who had started about a year ago. Executive assistant for the past 11 months, she confirmed. It was the only way I could get close enough to learn the truth. "You've been working undercover," I said, trying to process this twist. "Does Richard know?" Allison's expression softened slightly. "He does now." That's part of what triggered his confession. Over the next hour, Allison shared her remarkable story. She had grown up with limited means, raised by her grandmother after her mother's death. When her grandmother passed away 5 years ago, she found a box of old papers, documents, and letters that revealed the truth about her grandfather Lawrence Weber and how his work had been stolen by Richard Blackwell. "I was working on my computer science degree when I found out," she explained. "Everything suddenly made sense. Why we struggled financially while Blackwells lived in luxury. Why my grandfather died broken and abandoned when his work changed the world." Determined to uncover the full truth, Allison created a new identity and methodically worked her way into a position close to Richard. Her plan had been to gather evidence of the theft to pursue legal action against the company. But something unexpected happened, she continued. "The more I worked with Richard, the more I saw how the guilt had eaten away at him. He would stare at old photos for hours, make cryptic comments about debts that couldn't be repaid. Eventually, he started asking me questions about my background, my family. 3 months ago, Richard had called Allison into his office late one evening. He'd shown her a photograph of Lawrence Weber and asked if she saw the resemblance. Confronted directly, Allison had admitted her true identity. "I expected him to fire me, maybe threaten legal action," she said. Instead, he broke down completely. He told me everything. How he'd stolen my grandfather's work, used his connections to destroy him in court, built an empire on another man's genius. That confrontation was what led to Richard's decision to make amends by transferring company shares to Allison and to his bruised eye when he informed William of his intentions. "I never wanted to destroy the company," Allison clarified. "I just wanted the truth acknowledged and some measure of justice for my grandfather." From her bag, Allison produced a worn leather portfolio. Inside were original design documents, handwritten notes, and patent drafts clearly created by Lawrence Weber. The level of detail and innovation was remarkable, especially considering when they were created. "These prove everything," she said. "Lawrence Weber invented the core technology that built Blackwell's fortune." As we discussed how to proceed, a commotion near the library entrance caught my attention. 2 men in dark suits were showing a photograph to the librarian, who pointed directly at our table. "William's security," I whispered urgently. "We need to leave. Now." We barely escaped through a back exit, Allison clutching the precious documents as we rushed to my rental car. The confrontation left me shaken but more determined than ever. Over the following days, Allison and I formed an uneasy alliance. While I wanted to help Richard make amends, she had spent years planning to expose the Blackwells. Finding common ground wasn't easy, but we both wanted the truth to come out. During this time, I received an unexpected visit from my mother. Charlotte looked exhausted, the perfect Blackwell facade crumbling under the strain. "I've known the truth about Lawrence for years," she admitted. "Sitting in my hotel room, refusing even water. Not all of it, but enough. There were comments, things Dad said when drinking too much. Papers I found once that he quickly took away." She looked up, her eyes hollow. "I convinced myself it didn't matter, that the past was past. Now I don't know what to think." Before leaving, she warned me that William had hired a top crisis management firm to prepare for any potential scandal, with instructions to discredit all accusers if necessary. Just as Charlotte predicted, Patrick betrayed our trust the very next day. He had been recording our conversations and feeding information to William all along, hedging his bets by appearing to support both sides. The recording of me discussing the journal with Allison was now in William's hands. The media began picking up fragments of the story, with business publications running speculative pieces about trouble at Blackwell Technologies and potential leadership struggles. William launched a coordinated PR campaign, with carefully planted stories about Richard's health issues and memory problems, positioning himself as the reluctant but necessary steward of the company's future. The stress became too much for Richard. After a particularly heated board meeting where William publicly questioned his competence, Richard collapsed and was hospitalized with heart problems. Doctors warned that continued stress could trigger a fatal cardiac event. Lying in his hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily around him, Richard looked at me with clear, determined eyes. "Don't give up, Samantha. The truth matters more than I realized. I should have faced it decades ago." With Richard temporarily sidelined, the battle for Blackwell Technologies entered its most vicious phase. With Richard hospitalized, Allison and I knew we needed to act quickly before William could fully consolidate power. We set up operations in a small rental house paid for in cash, using prepaid phones and public internet connections to avoid detection. Jennifer Ross became instrumental to our strategy, providing legal guidance on how to validate Lawrence Weber's original patents and establish his rightful claim to the technology. "The statute of limitations for a standard theft claim has long expired," she explained, "but fraud has different considerations, especially when it involves ongoing benefit from the fraudulent activity." Meanwhile, Haley surprised everyone by returning from her brand ambassador trip and immediately throwing her considerable social media influence behind subtle messaging that countered William's narrative. Without explicitly mentioning family troubles, she began sharing stories about integrity in business and the courage to admit mistakes to her millions of followers. "William thought sending me away would silence me," she told me during a secret meeting at a coffee shop. "He forgot that I have a platform that reaches more people than his press releases ever will." Through painstaking financial research, I uncovered evidence that Thomas had been embezzling from the company for years, using sophisticated accounting tricks to funnel money through shell companies. The amounts were relatively small compared to the company's overall revenue, perhaps explaining why they hadn't been noticed, but they established a clear pattern of fraud. Richard, despite his weakened condition, took the critical step of signing power of attorney to me from his hospital bed. "William will try to use my health as further justification for the conservatorship," he said. "This legally establishes that I'm of sound mind and choose you to represent my interests." William's response was swift and vicious. Within days, fabricated evidence appeared suggesting I had a gambling addiction, complete with doctored photographs of me at casinos and falsified bank statements showing large cash withdrawals. The story was shopped to tabloids along with concerns from family members about my stability. The family's carefully cultivated public image began crumbling as rumors and counter-rumors spread through business circles. Investors grew nervous, and the company's stock price fluctuated wildly with each new development. During this chaos, Kimberly unexpectedly visited my hideout, having followed Haley there. Instead of exposing us, she revealed that William planned to destroy key evidence. "There's a storage facility where Dad keeps sensitive documents," she explained, her usual polished demeanor replaced by genuine concern. "He's sending people tomorrow to clear it out, including original contracts with Lawrence Weber that prove everything your grandfather said." When I asked why she was betraying her father, Kimberly's answer was simple: "Because I've watched him destroy people my whole life. I always told myself it was just business. Now I see it's who he is." Armed with this information, Allison and I formulated a dangerous plan to access the company archives before William's team could remove the evidence. Frank, still loyal to Richard, agreed to help us navigate the building's security. That night, we entered the corporate headquarters using Richard's private access codes. Frank created a diversion that drew the night security team to the main lobby while we slipped into the restricted archives section. "We have 20 minutes before they realize something's wrong," Frank warned before leaving to maintain his position. The archives were extensive, rows of fireproof cabinets containing the company's history. Following Kimberly's instructions, we located a hidden safe behind a section of removable wall panel. The combination, Lawrence Weber's birth date, a final irony, opened to reveal a treasure trove of evidence. Inside were the original collaboration agreements between Richard and Lawrence, prototype designs clearly in Lawrence's handwriting, and most damning, Letters from Richard to his attorneys outlining the strategy to steal the patents while Lawrence was hospitalized for exhaustion. We also found a prototype of the original device, barely the size of a shoebox but revolutionary for its time. Allison held it reverently, running her fingers over her grandfather's initials discreetly etched into the casing. "He built this," she whispered, tears forming. "All these years, his work has been changing the world, and no one even knows his name." Our victory was short-lived. As we finished photographing the documents, Thomas appeared in the doorway with 2 security guards. "I thought someone might try something like this," he said coldly. "You're trespassing on company property, Samantha. That's grounds for immediate arrest and potential charges of corporate espionage." The security guards moved toward us. I felt the weight of defeat pressing down, so close to vindication, only to be stopped at the final moment. Then, unexpectedly, Thomas's phone rang. The call lasted less than 30 seconds, but when he hung up, his expression had changed from triumph to concern. "Let them go," he ordered the guards. "But sir," one began. "I said let them go," Thomas snapped. "Now." As the confused guards stepped aside, Thomas leaned close to me. "Mother called. She's finally chosen a side. You have until morning before I report this incident." With that, he walked away, leaving the path clear. We escaped through Richard's private exit, clutching evidence that could rewrite the Blackwell legacy forever. The next morning, Charlotte called me. After decades of remaining neutral in family conflicts, she had finally taken a stand, providing a sworn statement about conversations she had witnessed between Richard and his lawyers years ago regarding the Weber technology. Her testimony included dates, names, and specific discussions about how to ensure Lawrence could never prove his claims. "I should have done this years ago," she told me, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. "Your father has moved out. I've filed for divorce." With Richard's health improving as the burden of his secret lifted, and our evidence growing stronger daily, we prepared for the final confrontation that would determine the future of Blackwell Technologies. 3 weeks after Richard's hospitalization, William called an emergency board meeting with a single agenda item: officially removing Richard as chairman and CEO of Blackwell Technologies. The meeting was scheduled at the company's headquarters in a glass and steel skyscraper that dominated the city skyline, a physical manifestation of the Blackwell empire. Behind the scenes, Allison and I had been meticulously preparing our countermove, organizing the evidence into an irrefutable presentation. Jennifer had helped create legal documentation validating Lawrence Weber's original patents and establishing a clear chain of events showing the fraudulent acquisition by Richard. The morning of the board meeting, Thomas attempted to physically block me from entering the building, standing in the lobby with security personnel. "You're not welcome here, Samantha," he stated firmly. "This is a closed board meeting." I held up the power of attorney document. "I'm legally representing Richard Blackwell, who remains the majority shareholder. Try to stop me, and I'll have a court order within the hour." Thomas's face tightened, but he stepped aside, whispering as I passed, "You're committing career suicide. No one crosses the family and survives in this industry." As I rode the elevator to the top floor, my phone rang with an unexpected caller. Diana, William's wife of 34 years, and someone who had always presented a united front with him in family matters. "William's going to announce a merger offer today," she said without preamble. "He's been secretly negotiating with Globetech to sell the company. The terms give him and Thomas golden parachutes worth millions, but most employees will be redundant after the acquisition." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, suspicion coloring my voice. "Because I'm tired, Samantha," she replied, sounding genuinely exhausted. "Tired of the lies, the manipulation, watching William destroy anyone who gets in his way. The board needs to know what he's planning before they vote on Richard's removal." This information was the final piece we needed. Diana's insider knowledge of William's plans completed the picture of a man willing to dismantle his father's legacy for personal gain. When I entered the boardroom, William was already at the head of the table, with Thomas at his right hand. Board members, 12 in total, mostly longtime business associates of Richard, sat in varying states of discomfort. A large screen displayed Richard on video conference from his hospital room, looking pale but determined. "Now that we're all here, William began with a pointed look at me. Let's address the unfortunate situation that brings us together. My father's health has deteriorated to the point where he can no longer effectively lead this company. Additionally, his recent irrational decisions threaten the stability of the business we've all worked to build. He motioned to Thomas, who distributed folders containing the conservatorship papers and medical evaluations questioning Richard's competence. The family has reluctantly concluded that new leadership is necessary, William continued smoothly. I'm proposing a temporary transition with myself as acting CEO until a permanent succession plan can be implemented. What William didn't know was that Allison was waiting outside, along with Jennifer Ross and a court reporter we'd hired to create an official record of the proceedings. I texted them a simple message. Now. The boardroom doors opened, and Allison entered, followed by our small team. William's face darkened with rage. This is a closed meeting, he snapped. Security. Before you call security, I interjected quickly. The board should know they're about to vote based on incomplete and deliberately misleading information. I connected my laptop to the room's presentation system, bringing up the first document, Lawrence Weber's original patent application with dates clearly preceding Richard's. Gentlemen, ladies, what you're about to see will fundamentally change your understanding of this company's founding, I began. Blackwell Technologies was built on stolen technology. My grandfather, Richard Blackwell, has admitted this and wishes to make amends. His attempts to right this wrong are not signs of mental incompetence. They're acts of belated integrity. For the next 40 minutes, I presented our evidence methodically. The original designs, the legal correspondence plotting to undermine Lawrence, the prototype with his initials, and statements from former colleagues confirming Lawrence's role in developing the technology. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock as the evidence mounted. William attempted to interrupt several times, but the board chair, an elderly man who had known Richard for decades, silenced him. Richard spoke from the hospital screen, his voice gaining strength as he addressed the board directly. I've lived with this lie for 45 years. I've enjoyed wealth and acclaim that should have been shared with Lawrence Weber. I cannot change the past, but I can ensure that his contribution is finally acknowledged and his descendants compensated. This isn't dementia speaking. It's the clearest my conscience has been in decades. William made one last desperate attempt to regain control. This is all ancient history. Even if it were true, the statute of limitations expired decades ago. Meanwhile, I have a time-sensitive offer from GlobeTech to acquire Blackwell Technologies at a premium that would benefit all shareholders. The room fell silent at this unexpected revelation. I seized the opening. Is that what this is really about? Not concern for Richard's health, but a secret deal that would dismantle the company and eliminate thousands of jobs? A deal that coincidentally includes special provisions for William and Thomas? I projected Diana's written statement detailing the merger terms, including the golden parachute provisions. Several board members leaned forward, examining the document with renewed interest. In the ensuing chaos, Thomas attempted to discredit our evidence by questioning its authenticity. His aggressive defense backfired spectacularly when, in his attempt to dismiss the financial irregularities we discovered, he accidentally revealed knowledge of transactions that he should have had no information about unless he was involved. How do you know about the Cayman transfers? One board member asked sharply. Those weren't included in their presentation. Thomas's face went pale as he realized his mistake. William shot him a warning look, but it was too late. His panic was evident to everyone in the room. The board called for a brief recess to digest the information. When they returned, the transformation was complete. William was asked to step down temporarily pending a full investigation, and the GlobeTech acquisition discussions were unanimously suspended. As security escorted William from the building, a humiliation he never thought he'd experience, he lunged at me, grabbing my arm painfully. "You'll regret this," he hissed before security pulled him away. This isn't over. Indeed, it wasn't. That night, we discovered that James, my father, had been selling company secrets to competitors for years, using his position as family counsel to access confidential information. His betrayal of Richard had extended far beyond the current conflict. The board appointed an interim leadership committee consisting of 2 longtime executives and, surprisingly, me as Richard's representative. Our first action was to publicly acknowledge Lawrence Weber's contributions and announce plans to rename the company's research division in his honor. The truth had finally emerged, but the family war was far from over. In the aftermath of the board meeting, the Blackwell family fractured completely. William and Thomas faced potential criminal charges for their financial manipulations, while the board launched a full investigation into the company's past and present operations. We gathered at Richard's hospital room, now a strange neutral territory in the ongoing family conflict. His condition had improved enough that doctors were discussing discharge plans, though he remained weakened by the ordeal. Charlotte arrived first, sitting quietly by her father's bed, holding his hand. The strain of recent weeks had aged her, but there was also a new resolve in her posture. She had filed for divorce from James, ending a 30-year marriage built more on ambition than love. "He never loved me," she said simply when I asked how she was coping. "He loved what I represented, access to wealth and power. I think I always knew, but it was easier to pretend." William and Diana arrived separately, their own marriage, another casualty of the conflict. Diana had provided crucial information about William's secret merger plans, earning his unforgiving enmity. William appeared haggard, the immaculate image he'd cultivated, now visibly cracking under pressure. Kimberly approached me before entering Richard's room. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for everything. I believed Dad's version of events for so long that I couldn't see what was happening." "Why did you help us in the end?" I asked. Her eyes drifted to William, who stood stiffly by the window, isolated even in a room full of family. "Because I saw myself becoming him. And I didn't like who that person was." Patrick arrived last, receiving cold glares from everyone present. His betrayal, recording conversations and feeding information to both sides, had earned him universal distrust. Richard, propped up in his bed, surveyed his fractured family with sad eyes. "I created this," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Not just the company, but this legacy of deception. Everything that's happened stems from that first lie decades ago." The silence that followed was broken by the arrival of Allison Weber. Richard had specifically requested her presence, a gesture that William visibly resented. When Allison entered, the atmosphere in the room shifted, the embodiment of the truth they'd all tried to bury standing before them. Richard extended his hand to her. "Allison, I want you to meet my family. And I want my family to meet Lawrence Weber's granddaughter, the woman who had the courage to confront me and force me to face the truth." The formal introduction served as a powerful acknowledgement. No longer would Lawrence Weber be an unmentioned ghost haunting the Blackwell empire. His legacy would be officially recognized. The legal team arrived next, presenting documentation for the new corporate structure that would transfer 40% of company shares to Allison as Lawrence's heir. The papers also established the Weber Blackwell Foundation for Innovation Ethics, funded with $50 million to promote ethical practices in technology development. As the lawyers explained the agreements, Charlotte stood and addressed Allison directly. "I want you to know that some of us are truly sorry for what happened to your grandfather. His contribution deserves recognition, and I'm glad that's finally happening." William could no longer contain his anger. "This is absurd. You're giving away billions based on unproven claims about ancient history. Richard, you built this company. Without your business acumen, Weber's technology would have gone nowhere." "Perhaps," Richard acknowledged. "But we'll never know because I never gave him the chance. Lawrence deserved better than what I did to him." While the legal discussions continued, I noticed Haley recording the entire conversation on her phone. When I questioned her, she smirked and whispered, "Insurance. Patrick isn't the only one who knows how to record things." Her revelation proved prescient when we later discovered Patrick had been taking detailed notes on family conversations for years, planning to write a tell-all memoir about the Blackwell dynasty. His betrayal extended far beyond the current conflict. He had been exploiting family confidences for potential profit all along. As the meeting concluded, media outlets began reporting on major restructuring at Blackwell Technologies, with speculation about the reasons behind it. Industry analysts noted the unusual transfer of shares to an unknown individual and questioned what it might mean for the company's future. That evening, as I returned to my apartment for the first time in weeks, I found James waiting outside my door. My father looked diminished somehow, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. "Samantha, you need to understand my position," he began without preamble. "I was protecting our family's interests. By selling company information to competitors?" I challenged. "That wasn't protecting anyone but yourself." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I made mistakes. But so did Richard. He's no saint in this story. The difference is, he's trying to make amends," I replied. "Are you?" James had no answer. As he walked away, I realized I felt no sadness watching him go, only relief that the pretense was finally over. The most severe attack came 3 days later. Frank called me in the middle of the night, his voice urgent. "Someone tampered with Mr. Blackwell's medication at the hospital," he reported. I caught a nurse replacing his heart medication with something else. When questioned, she admitted being paid by someone matching William's description. Security footage confirmed Frank's story, showing William entering the hospital during shift change wearing a maintenance uniform. The attempted medication tampering could have caused a fatal heart attack, a desperate final attempt to silence Richard permanently. William was arrested the next morning. The family gathered again, this time in Richard's newly secured hospital room, to confront the shocking reality that one of their own had attempted murder to protect his position. "I knew William was ambitious," Richard said quietly after hearing the news. "I never imagined he was capable of this." As police led William away in handcuffs, the family watched in stunned silence. The empire Richard had built through deception was collapsing under the weight of that original sin. But from the ruins, something more authentic might yet emerge. 6 months after the dramatic board meeting that changed everything, Blackwell Technologies officially became Weber Blackwell Technologies in a ceremony attended by industry leaders and media. Richard, fully recovered physically, though still carrying the emotional weight of his past actions, stood alongside Allison as they unveiled the company's new logo and direction. The company had weathered the transition better than many expected. After initial stock volatility, investors responded positively to the transparency and ethical focus of the restructured organization. Richard, stepping back from day-to-day operations but remaining as chairman emeritus, worked closely with Allison to integrate her grandfather's original vision with the company's current capabilities. I had accepted a new role heading the company's ethics committee, a position created specifically to ensure that past mistakes would not be repeated. The committee had authority to review all major decisions and acquisitions, with veto power if ethical concerns arose. The legal consequences for William and Thomas proved substantial. William faced charges of attempted murder, fraud, and corporate espionage, while Thomas's embezzlement had been thoroughly documented and prosecuted. Both would likely spend years dealing with legal proceedings and potential incarceration. Charlotte, divorced from James and reclaiming her Blackwell surname, emerged from her traditional supporting role to become an active board member, particularly focused on the company's charitable foundation. She seemed to blossom away from James's controlling influence, developing confidence in her business acumen. "I spent decades believing I wasn't smart enough for the business world," she confided during our weekly lunch. James reinforced that belief. "Now I'm discovering what I'm actually capable of." Richard established the Lawrence Weber Scholarship for underprivileged students in STEM fields, a program that would provide full university funding and guaranteed internships at Weber Blackwell Technologies. The first class of Weber scholars included 20 brilliant young people who would never have had access to such education otherwise. Haley surprised everyone by leveraging her influence to promote the company's ethical rebrand, creating content that humanized the dramatic changes and positioned Weber Blackwell as a pioneer in corporate responsibility. Her authentic posts about family reconciliation and acknowledgement of past wrongs resonated with younger consumers especially. Our annual family gathering that December was dramatically different from previous years. The lavish Aspen estate had been sold, with proceeds going partly to the foundation and partly to compensate employees whose pensions had been affected by Thomas's financial manipulations. Instead, we gathered at Richard's much smaller lake house, a property he'd owned for decades but rarely used during his empire-building years. Only 8 of us attended: Richard, Allison, now considered part of the family, Charlotte, Haley, myself, Kimberly, who had distanced herself from William, Jennifer Ross, whose loyalty had earned her a permanent place in our circle, and Frank, who had retired from security work but remained Richard's trusted friend. The simplicity of the gathering highlighted how much had changed. No staff, no photographers, no performance of family perfection, just honest conversation around a table of food we'd prepared ourselves. Allison and I had developed a genuine friendship, bonding over our shared values and determination to ensure the company operated ethically moving forward. We often laughed about how we'd initially circled each other with suspicion, now replaced by mutual respect. "I came looking for justice," Allison reflected as we walked along the frozen lakeshore that evening. "But I found something I wasn't expecting." "What's that?" I asked. "Peace," she said simply, "and a chance to build something positive from all this pain." Richard had changed profoundly. The commanding, sometimes intimidating presence that had defined him throughout my life had softened. He listened more than he spoke, asked questions instead of giving orders, and seemed genuinely interested in understanding others' perspectives. One afternoon, I found him sitting alone on the deck despite the cold, staring at the distant mountains. "I've been thinking about success," he said as I joined him. "For decades, I measured it by stock prices, acquisitions, and my ranking on wealth lists. None of that brought me peace." "What does success look like to you now?" I asked. He gestured toward the house where voices and laughter could be heard. "This. Truth. Reconciliation where possible. Making whatever amends I still can." William made one final, unexpected appearance in our story. A week before Christmas, he requested a meeting with Richard. Against everyone's advice, Richard agreed, with appropriate security precautions. When he returned from the prison meeting, Richard seemed thoughtful but not distressed. He wanted to apologize. He explained to our skeptical faces. Not for everything, William still believes much of what he did was justified. But for the medication tampering, he said that crossed a line he never thought he would. "Do you believe him?" Charlotte asked. Richard considered the question. "I believe he regrets being caught. But perhaps that's the beginning of actual remorse. Either way, forgiveness is more for my benefit than his." The following Thanksgiving marked 1 full year since Richard's bruised face and shocking announcement had changed our family forever. We gathered again, this time at a mountain retreat where Allison and I had organized a proper family meeting to discuss the foundation's future projects. As we assembled around the table, our small, authentic family circle, Richard rose to speak, crystal glass in hand. But instead of the formality that had characterized so many previous gatherings, he simply said, "I'm grateful for truth, however painful. And for each of you who chose integrity when it would have been easier not to." He raised his glass, no bruises on his face this time, only the lines earned through a difficult year of honest reckoning. As I looked around at our reformed family, I realized that wealth had never been the true Blackwell legacy. The real inheritance had been patterns of deception, ambition at any cost, and moral compromise, passed down through generations. By breaking that cycle, we had gained something far more valuable than billions. The chance to build something honest from the ruins of a fortune built on lies. The truth had cost us everything, but given back something money never could: peace. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this family drama resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that choosing integrity is always worth it in the end. Thanks for coming along on this painful but ultimately healing journey with me, and I'll see you in the next video.